Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tier Listing Gaming. I'm taking a slight break from the XCOM Soldier Class tier list to bring you probably my favorite series of all time in gaming. This is the Pokemon main line tier ranking. Um, so these are most of the games are going to be on the Game Boy Color, Advance, DS, 3DS, Switch, um, and overall, it's my ranking of the games. I will admit I do have personal biases, which I will discuss when I get to certain games in the series. However, I'm just gonna rattle off and try to explain my thought process behind it. I will give a slight analysis or preview of what I'm looking for. Um, Something that was made very early on, so like red, blue, yellow, green, those are going to get a little bit more leeway in terms of data that's available because there was less available at the time. The games, there's a joke that the games were held together by duct tape, um, and it is definitely true with all that spaghetti code that's in there, but it's also a product of the time. At the time, coding was a lot more difficult and it was a lot more prominent for these bugs to come through because they had to jam a lot of stuff in there. And maybe I'll make a video going in why I think the games rank where they are. But for now, I'm just gonna start going off, rattling off these games. So right off the bat, um, technically Pokemon Green is going to be the first one on the list. And I will say, just because I haven't played it, ordinarily I probably would have put it C because it's the same game as the Western release of Red Blue. But I am just going to put it in the NA spot just because I haven't played it. I don't think it's fair to fully judge a game based off of how I didn't play it. However, it's probably the same, maybe a little bit worse if there's more bugs than Red and Blue. But again, it's right. I'm just gonna put it in NA just because I don't think it's fair for me to grade a game that I haven't played. Um, Also, I'm going to add a row. Oh, whoops. And I'm going to add a second row because, and you'll see when we get here why I'm adding these rows, because I think it's important to differentiate because a lot of the games are going to be right in this ranking, and it's important to get a correct differentiation between them, get everything correct in that sense. Let me just changing the colors too. There we go. Now it's a little bit better. So now we're on to Red and Blue, and I think that they belong in the B minus tier. They're the same game, just a couple different encounters. And the reason why I'm putting them in B minus tier, I know a lot of people who rank them put them in C tier. They're a product of their time. They have a lot of things that are going for them, meaning that they're the first game in the series. Nobody knows how it's going to be perceived. Nobody knows how these games are going to do. They're trying to jam so much content for the time into these games that you pull, like there's a joke about the Super Mario. The picture of it is more data than the game. Like that's what these games are. These games have like 1 megabyte maybe or 1 kilobyte. I forget the amount of data that's in it, but it's not a lot. Like the photos that you take on a daily basis of your pets, that's going to add up to more data than these games had to work with. So if you played the games properly through and weren't actively trying to go for a cheat, you can play these games perfectly fine. There's a lot of things that haven't aged well, namely the very limited bag space, some move sets, even a lot of moves, the bug type, the ghost type, those are both very poor. But again, it's the product of the time. There was a lot that was going into these games, and again, I'm gonna give them a slight bump up. They're gonna be in the B minus tier because again, it's a lot of work that went into these games. and the way it's very, I could maybe go into this in a different video, but it's very creative how they utilize the game space, and if something wasn't being used, they repurposed it so that way they could utilize all the space that they had. Um, Next is Pokemon Yellow, technically, and I'm going to put it ever so slightly above Red and Blue into the B tier. I do have some biases because my brothers played Red and Blue, and I got Yellow. So I definitely played Yellow a lot more. I definitely like that you can get all three starters in the game. It follows the anime a little bit, so you feel a little bit more immersed if you watched it as a kid. So again, I give Yellow a slight bump. Plus, you get Pikachu, and who doesn't want a Pikachu following you everywhere? So again, it's a little bit better, but it should, and again, product of its time. Should be noted that there's a lot that these games did way back in the late 90s that it just wouldn't, nobody really thought it would have been possible if you like told them at the time that you're making these games, and this is what's going on. Like any programmer would look at you and think that you were insane. So next game we have on the list is Gen 2, and we have Pokemon Gold and Silver. I'm going to put Gold and Silver right above Yellow into the B tier. They, again, order matters, but not for the pair. So again, Gold and Silver are slightly above Yellow, but again, they're the same game. It's interchangeable. It really doesn't matter between the two games. So I played a lot of Gold and Silver. I definitely like that you can catch both legendary birds, both the box art legendaries in the game. It's not like later down the line where you have the version exclusive legendaries. You can catch both Lugia and Ho-Oh in both games, which is pretty cool. The game's expanded on Red, Blue, Yellow. You get 2 regions in, again, not a lot of space that they have to use, but they also fixed a lot of the bugs that were present in Red and Blue and Yellow. But that being said, they were still Game Boy Color games, and they had to retain compatibility, which also left some bugs in the game. But they expanded on what they had going for them, which is really good. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of problems with the game, mainly the leveling system. It's quite poor. The post game is awesome. Like I say, there's 2 regions in the game. You get toward the second region, but the pacing is just very different when you're playing the post game versus the early game. But again, they're still very, very fun games. And while they might not have, they might also not have aged fully well. Again, so they built on the bag space, but it's still limited. You still have these very wonky mechanics that if you go back on, you'd be like, oh, this is kind of weird. There's a lot of mistakes I think that they made, but again, I'm not going to harp on a game that was made in 2000 and say, oh, they completely did it wrong. No, they did a lot of good things for these games. So moving on to Crystal, this is the sister game, and there's a lot that they improved on. Oh, I say a lot, but really they implemented a couple new story elements to make it feel like a new game. They added some cool features that maybe when you look back on it, you're like, oh, it's only a couple things. But again, at the time, it kind of is a lot. The story kind of centers a little bit around Suicune, which might not have been the coolest legendary, but in the original 3 artworks, Suicune definitely did look the best. I'm gonna put it in the. I'm struggling between the A and the A minus tier. I might bump it up later, but I think for now I'm gonna put in the A minus tier again. Step above gold and silver. They did change the legendary quest, meaning that you had to catch the 3 dogs before you could obtain Ho-Oh, which was kind of neat. And you can also get Suicune as part of the game. It wasn't a roaming legendary anymore, which is very awesome. Anyone who's gone on the hunt for roaming legendaries, it was very tough. And for me, growing up playing this game, to date myself, I got this game when I was 8 years old, and it was very frustrating at the time because the internet wasn't good. You weren't able to search up guides. You weren't able to look around. You had to basically kind of go rumor through the rumorville from your friends, and like, hopefully somebody knew how to do it. But again, it was very tough, especially when people gave you bad information. You couldn't verify it. You couldn't look up like a guide for it. Even if you don't get the direct answer, you still had a very hard time figuring out how to do the roaming legendaries for the 3 games. So by taking away that and making Suicune a more integral part of the story was pretty neat. Also, animated sprites, that blew my mind when I first saw it. So I have to say, like, that is a very good touch that they put in the game. So now we're moving on to Ruby and Sapphire. These Gen 3 is probably my most played game. And Ruby and Sapphire, played them a lot when I was a kid. Again, very, very, very fun games. I enjoyed them a lot. I played Sapphire more because I like Kyogre over Groudon. But again, the 2 games, very fun games. I'm going to put them... It's tough, but I think I'm going to put them slightly ahead of Crystal, because again, when they switched over to the Game Boy Advance, they fixed a ton of bugs with the games. They fixed a lot of problems that were going on with Crystal. One of the big things, though, was that they didn't have backwards compatibility, and that has to do more with the programming thing. But it was very difficult to look at the game and be like, oh, like when you complete the game, it's like, oh, cool, there's 200 Pokemon in the Pokedex, but then you're like, oh, like I kind of wanted to bring over some of my old Pokemon. I want to bring over like any Pokemon you were attached to, namely Gen 1 starters, Gen 2 starters, and legendaries, any of your favorite in between Pokemon, any evolutions. So not having those in the game was kind of upsetting, but they were still very fun games. Still played through them a lot. Enjoyed the story. Enjoyed a lot. But that being said, and this goes for Emerald too, they are very cheesy if you choose Mudkip, which is the best starter, which is known to be the best starter for forever. So there are some balance issues in that sense, but I do think that they are a slight notch above Crystal, just because they built upon the game that way. I'm gonna skip over Emerald for a second and go on to Fire Red, Leaf Green. These are A-tier games. These are definitely better than Ruby and Sapphire. The games, they're what a remake should aspire to be. There's additional story, and they also fix a lot of the janky stuff. They fix a lot of, like, in these games in Gen 3 sprites look very, very good. And they fixed a lot that was wrong with the original games. And they made a lot of quality of life features. Really the only one that they maybe missed out on was maybe a better way to get berries and infinite TMs. But again, I'm not gonna complain too much. These are very, very good games. If you're just looking to start out playing Pokemon, Nuzlocke, all that stuff, Pokemon Challengers shout out always says that Fire Red, Leaf Green is a very good place to start, and I agree. They are very, very good games. If you look up some ROM hacks, you probably can find ones with this physical special split to make them just a little bit better, or even just quality of life features. But again, even the base game is very, very good to play. They add a lot of Pokemon too, because these are Gen 3 games, so they're adding a lot of the Gen 2, Gen 3 Pokemon in the post game, and overall just a very, very enjoyable experience. I didn't play these games until a little bit later in my teenage years, even though they came out earlier, but they were very fun when I actually did play them. Now, I'm going to come back, like I said, I'm coming back to Emerald. Emerald is one of the best games in the series, hands down. And while I don't want to dive too much into ROM hacks because that's not the point, these are the mainline games. Emerald is just an absolute blast to play. The story builds upon Ruby and Sapphire and makes it, instead of one sided, makes you more as like a makes the character more neutral in the conflicts, but also trying to prevent the destruction of the world. Because you're not picking sides like these guys. You're kind of just playing through like, oh, you're trying to do this. Well, I'm going to stop you now. Emerald also, like I said, when you like I said, I don't want to dive too much into ROM hacks, but when you make a couple like teensy bit of quality of life features, the game is perfect. But to say that in 2005 they would make this game that is so close to perfect is just amazing. And in the post game Battle Frontier, ton of fun. I cannot tell you how many hours I've spent on the Battle Frontier. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing feature. And when I get to the later games, you'll see I'm very depressed that they do not have that kind of system implemented. It is very frustrating to go through a game, get to the post game, and it's just kind of like, oh, that's it. Or you got to wait until, I don't know, a year later and buy DLC, and then you get a little bit extra, and then again, it's still just like, oh, that's it. Like, oh, it's over. Great. And multiple save files, so you can't just restart and play it over again, unless you want to delete all your Pokemon. So, Emerald created an absolutely great experience. You can catch all 3 of the box art legendaries from the generation. Again, expansion on Ruby and Sapphire. You get the expanded Safari Zone. You get a couple different locations too that you can go to. So again, just overall a fantastic game. Highly recommend to play it. Maybe just try to find a quality of life ROM if you're a little bit later and you're used to like physical special split. But again, I would absolutely recommend Emerald to anybody who wants to play a great game. Now, moving on to Gen 4, Diamond and Pearl. Let's get the good stuff out of the way. Physical special split is definitely important. It definitely fixed a lot of the stupid issues, for lack of a better word, that were present in the early games. The switch over to the DS was not kind because there's a lot of bugs that are present in these games. All I have to do is go to Bulbapedia and look up some of the bugs, which are kind of ridiculous. To me, these games, I'm sorry, Gen 4 fans, I'm going to put them in the C tier below Red and Blue because the game shouldn't be nearly as buggy as the original games when they're released 10 years later. And not only that, but they did not think out the Pokemon distribution. There's a lot of trainers that are using Pokemon that have no relation to their types, Flint, this shouldn't have been an issue in the game. Like, I'm sorry, but this was a swing and this is kind of a swing and a miss. This really wasn't the best that they could do. That being said, a lot of Gen 4 Pokemon are good. There's a lot of very fun Pokemon. Some of my favorites, like Gallade, are in there. I definitely like the legendaries. Palkia and Dialga are they're both good Pokemon, but again, I can't shake the feeling that the game just, and it also felt slow playing it. It felt like the game was slowed down when playing. Like when I played Emerald, like the game felt like it was moving at a normal pace, but these games just felt like they're so slow in a lot of areas. So I have to drop it down a little bit, just again for performance reasons, and decisions at the time, which should have been known. But I'm not gonna beat up too much on it. It's just my opinion. You can always disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. So, Platinum, on the other hand, easy S tier. Platinum expands and fixes what Diamond and Pearl did wrong. They also have the Battlefront tier. Brought it back. Two of the studios are repeats, but 3 new studios, I'll take it. I'll take 5 battle facilities. That's still a good number. Emerald had 7, Platinum has 5. Again, perfectly fine. But it also fixed a lot of the issues that were present in Diamond and Pearl. They fixed the distribution of Pokemon. You even though you had to trade technically to get Magmortar and Electivire, like those were actually obtainable Pokemon. The game the game just made it better. Like that's just really just the easiest way to put it. It was also kind of neat that like if you played out of these games, it was like, oh, the Lake Spirit stops these guys, whatever. But then they're like, oh no, with the 2 of them, they're too strong. So then you got to battle Giratina, which is, these are the rules of time and space. And then you have antimatter, the opposite of or one of the other main elements for the universe. So again, kind of cool. Like I said, expands on the game. Definitely a lot of fun, and also not to beat up on Diamond Pro more, but like I said, fixing also distribution of Pokemon. Like, why does an Elite Four member have a Beautifly and a Dustox in these 2 games? No, they fixed it, and they fixed it in Platinum. They actually gave them like a full team of good Pokemon, or at least decent, because bug type. But anyway. Casual playthrough, you're not gonna always be prepared for what comes out. So anyway, moving right along, we're gonna go to Heart Gold, Soul Silver. These 2 games, again, absolutely nailed it. Made great remake. Gold and Silver had some of their flaws, such as which they also didn't really address in Heart Gold, Soul Silver with the pacing. But other than that, the games are modernized. It can be very difficult to go back to Gold and Silver after playing Heart Gold and Soul Silver with a lot of quality of life features made. It's a lot easier to travel between the 2 regions. Again, these 2 games are a ton of fun. Highly recommend. Also, you guessed it, post-game content. The same 5 facilities that are in Platinum are in Heart Gold, Soul Silver. So with that, I'm going to bump them up to the S tier, and I am going to give the Platinum the slight edge, but these are still 2 fantastic games. Again, they probably get the bump. Yeah, I shouldn't say they get the bump down because these are all technically copies of a previous game. Ruby and Sapphire original games, whereas Emerald's kind of uses a lot of the stuff in Ruby and Sapphire again. So our technically all 4, but all these games, all 3 of these games are very, very good games to play. Highly recommend. And if you want just those quality of life. Like those extra little quality of life features, again, just play a couple ROM hacks of the game with the same base story, and you'll have a ton of fun. Very, very good games to play. Next, we got Black and White. I'm going to move this here just so it's a little bit easier to find. So, the thing with Black and White is I have a very strange relationship with these games. So when they first came out, I thought that they were bad games. I was very adamant about some of the decisions that they made regarding Black and White. As time has gone on, they have grown on me. They definitely took a very huge risk, which I'll always approve taking a reasonable. And I will caveat, there's a caveat, a reasonable risk to make it so that until the post game you can only use Gen 5 Pokemon. There's a very unique experience to have that really isn't the same unless you played red and blue and yellow. So I think that the story, if you're interested in the story, Black and White has an excellent story. They absolutely make it a very very interesting story with some ambiguity into it. Um, Overall, these games are. I'm willing. Where should I put them? Definitely better than these guys. I'd say better than Ruby and Sapphire. Are they better than Fire Red and Leaf Green? I will say with Black and White, sometimes getting out of the early game can be a little annoying because of the way that grinding is. Because they changed the EXP system in these games. Um, I'm gonna put them in the A minus tier, if only because I think that Black and White are in the S tier. So, or Black White 2 are in the S tier. So, again, these games are. I'm gonna bump them also ahead of Platinum. Um, actually, actually, I'm gonna keep them behind Platinum if only because Platinum has a great post game as well once you beat the game. So you can actually have replayability. But that shouldn't deter you from playing these games. These are still again very 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 good games. The added content, the expansion of the story from Black and White is fantastic. Again, um, even though they reuse a lot of the Black and White um, um, features, map, etc., they're really just building up from the starting block. They add a lot to the game that makes it a lot of fun. And you can also use all your favorite Pokemon. You learned about a lot of good Pokemon from Black and White, and now you can use them alongside your original favorites in Black White 2. I definitely think that they are some of the best games again to play in the series. If you haven't played them, absolutely get back to fire it, find a ROM, find a hard copy, find a DS, fire them up, play them. Again, if you want a couple maybe little quality of life features, maybe maybe look for a ROM hack with those. But again, these are just fantastic games to play. And now X and Y. Oof. X and Y are a bit of a fall from grace. I just spent all like some of this time praising Black White 2, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Platinum Emerald. X and Y were kind of potato. They like at the time, like it was kind of cool seeing some of the Pokemon. There's definitely some fan favorites in the games. I was a sucker for Talonflame, Greninja. I loved Yveltal. I think Yveltal is a very cool Pokemon. The games just kind of felt lackluster, and one of the things that I haven't praised yet from Black White, Black 2, White 2. This is something that gets talked about a lot. Believe the hype. The sprites are fantastic. The animated sprites that they have in these games are beautiful. But I can't say the same for X and Y. There's a lot of sprites that just are terrible for lack of a better word. There really isn't any other way to put it. I'm gonna put them just ahead of Diamond and Pearl, but also recognize that they kind of aren't. There's a couple things that are good, like yes, the fairy type was needed, and they had some areas where you can catch some old Pokemon, like I think it was the Friend Safari where you can catch like some of the earlier starters. It was kind of nice, but there was a lot for the games that kind of there wasn't a lot of extra to the game, and the post game story was pretty bad. And Black White, Black Two, White Two got rid of the Battle Frontier and made it just a Battle Tree, and which is basically the Battle Tower. And X and Y continued along the trend, which I absolutely despise. I again, these games are just they're not great. There's a lot of the hand holding too that goes on in these games, and this is really where it started, where the game makes you feel like you're an idiot and like, don't worry about getting lost because we're gonna tell you 4 times where to go, and your rivals aren't that strong. They're really weak. They're they don't really pose a threat. You're just you're just playing these games and you're just like, this is pretty easy. And it's not that we have kids who grew up with these games got better. It's also just like, oh, we're gonna start choosing the starter that's weak against yours, whereas everyone else had the starter that was stronger against you. Um, so again, just and the animation, the character sprites don't really look that good either. A lot of them do look really bad. Um, so again, I just the games overall aren't that great. There's a lot of gym leaders too that don't have a full move sets or full Pokemon teams. The Elite Four has 4 Pokemon. Like, come on, give me a break. Like, that's not. And Black and White had the same thing. Black Two, White Two had the same thing. But again, I gotta drop them for that. Like, they should have known better. Really, is the easiest way to put it. So, um, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, very good remakes. Definitely built upon the Ruby and Sapphire games. A lot of post game. The new story was very good. Um, the jump, I don't think is as drastic as Red Blue to Fire Red Leaf Green or Gold Silver to Heart Gold Soul Silver. But I definitely think that they're very very good games. Um, I'm gonna bump up Black and White just a smidge and put Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire ahead of Ruby and Sapphire, because again, it is a lot of the same game. They do add some stuff, but to make a game 10 years later and everyone's looking forward to Battle Frontier, we're like, oh, this is finally a game. We're gonna get the Battle Frontier. They're gonna build upon the original game, and then you get just straight up cut off at the knee. Oh, here's a photo of it in progress. Like, oh, thanks guys. Really appreciate it. So, just an absolute tease that just spits in your face at the end. So I will bump him down. Maybe I would have put him in A tier, but looking back on some of the decisions that they made for these games, I will bump him down. But that being said, legendary hunting is a huge part of the post game. A lot of fun. They start in Gen 6. I also forgot to mention this in Black White. They start making some of the grinding for competitive Pokemon a little bit less tedious. They introduced like hyper training, if I remember correctly, or not hyper training. It's like the mini game with the soccer balls that you shoot out to gain EVs. They make that easier for your Pokemon to EV train. And this is also around the time where IV training or IV breeding rather is becoming easier. So again, these are good games. Definitely a lot of fun. If you're a fan of Ruby and Sapphire, I definitely recommend picking them up. But there's also a lot that I wish that they did differently. But I'm not gonna lie. I still posted a ton of hours to these games. So next we got Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon, what to make of you? These games, these games are probably C tier games. They're just the games. This is X and Y. I will say like it was like, oh, that's it. Like you kind of felt like shafted a little bit, but Sun and Moon, like to make a game 4 or 5 years later and to literally make an incomplete game. And the reason why I know it's incomplete is because a year later they released Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, which were complete games. Also, I'm gonna preemptively put these guys the B tier above silver and gold. Nah, no, they're gonna go behind. No, they're gonna go behind all these. I'll get to these in a second, but these were incomplete games. The story was potato. A lot of the region felt slow too. There was a lot of Pokemon that had either low speed or lost speed upon evolution. None of the starters were particularly fast. It didn't feel fun. Like just like, oh great, I have another Pokemon with base 70 speed. I have another Pokemon with 40 speed, base 40 speed. I have another Pokemon with base 60 speed. Like, the regional bird, I love Toucanon, but why is he slower than the pre-evolution? The pre-evolution is 90 speed, and the big bird gets 60 speed. Like, I just think it's very frustrating to play these games. They're incomplete games. That's just the easiest way to put it. But Ultra Sun, Ultra Move definitely expand on the game. There's definitely a lot that they could have done differently. The story could have been revised. It could have been made years later, but they kind of just took the same game, just expanded on it. Which, um, maybe that's reminiscent. Maybe that should be B minus tier, but I'm gonna put them at the very low end. Like basically, they're slightly above red and blue. Um, because they don't have nearly as many bugs. And they have a pretty good post game. You know, you get to find all the legendary Pokemon again, catch all of them, and do the battle tree. But again, man, these games are just it was very depressing playing through these games and me being like, man, I wish they had more. I definitely like going to see the Ultra Beasts in their natural habitat. Some of my favorite Pokemon are from this game, but again, they're just they're very frustrating to play. Um but that being said, they did introduce a difficulty curve in these games, which was I will give them props to it. The totem Pokemon are pretty difficult. You have to actually plan out your fights. Doing a 2-on-1 battle is not fun, um, to say the least, and definitely challenges you to think outside the box to try to figure out what the best method is to defeat a lot of these Pokemon. Um, let's go Pikachu and let's go Eevee. If if we were gonna rate this based off of cuteness, let's go Pikachu, let's go Eevee are S plus plus tier. They're all the way up here, but they're not very good games. The games are just like if you want to make the games really easy, you get a second Joy-Con, you throw in your second Pokemon, and you beat up on the 2-on-1s. I just talked about how difficult the 1 versus 2s are in these games. Well, you can have a 2-on-1 in this game, and it's easy peasy lemon squeezy. Pokemon Go mechanics for catching is very frustrating. The starter Pokemon are absurdly overpowered. The game is super easy. It's just they're not good games. Like, and maybe I'm looking at it from somebody who's played Pokemon for 25 years, but the games just aren't that good. Like, there's no other way to put it. They really aren't that good. Are there any saving graces? I mean, you get to play through Kanto again, I guess. Having an overpowered Eevee that can learn all of its evolution, like elemental moves, like that is pretty cool. and Pikachu learns some good moves, but Eevee definitely learns the better ones. But they're just they're not that good. The games aren't that good. Um, Moving on to Gen 8. I did not play any of these games, so I'm not going to give a judgment because I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. But these games, I'll get to Diamond and Pearl in a second, or Brilliant Diamond, Shine Pearl, whatever. Sword and Shield. When Dexit happened, I was very annoyed. I was very frustrated. And I get it; it's happened in previous games, but come on, we're in like when these games released, it was like 2018 or 2019. Like that shouldn't have been an issue. You had all of the sprites ready. I don't understand what the holdup is now. Maybe there's a design decision behind Game Freak. Including over 800 Pokemon is a lot of work. But again, these games just weren't. From what I heard of the story, the story's also pretty terrible, and I've heard a lot of mean things about Hop, about how he's in a very annoying um, rival, and the fact that the DLC came in and they're like, "Oh, you pay $60 extra for this DLC," like, "Oh, great." Like I'd rather just go play Emerald. Like I'll be honest, I'd rather just go play Platinum. Like I like and then Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, like all you need to do is look up the reviews of the game, and they're both like they're pretty terrible. You're not missing much if you're not playing it. Apparently, again, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna judge these games because I haven't played them. Um, I will say though, I heard that the competitive scene or the making competitive Pokemon is easier in these games, which I do approve of because it's making it more accessible to a lot of people. But again, just I'm sorry, but I can't bring myself to play these games. Maybe in the future, I will when there's like a Switch emulator, but I'm not going to be playing these games, and I'm probably not going to be playing these games either. Legends Arceus, on the other hand, was an absolute banger. I'm going to put it behind Platinum, because it is a little slow to start. The battle mechanics were changed, and I don't think it was a good change. I think that was one of the risks that they took, which they failed on. But other than that, the story's fun. The open world mechanics are a lot of fun. It's definitely a very fun game to play. All the Pokemon, like this doesn't have a partner game like Black White 2 where like half the, or not half, but like a good 20 Pokemon are over here. There's no trade evolutions. A lot of the Pokemon in there are very fun Pokemon to play with. Definitely a very fun game. I just wish that if you haven't played it, the battle mechanics are much different. I don't like them. It's not fun. It really isn't. But it's not the end all of the game. It doesn't ruin the game. I just wish that they didn't change it. Now maybe it's reflective of like the ancient times when the battle was differently and it was more based on like it wasn't turn based. It was just like, oh, you attacked whenever you were available to attack. They also changed some of the status conditions, which was kind of neat. Sleep is no longer absurdly broken. Freeze isn't absurdly broken. So that was all kind of neat. Definitely very unique to the game. And just really running around on the Pokemon, being able to go wherever you want, even if you were vastly underleveled, as long as you had the means to it, was pretty cool. I remember there was one time where I went to an area that was technically off limits, just to catch a Sliggoo or a Hisuian Sliggoo, or a Gumi, whatever that Pokemon is, because I really wanted the Hisuian Gudra. Um, so like I took the word deer ride and like jumped off a giant cliff and made it to the other area, and I was like running around trying to avoid all the Pokemon attacking me. So that was definitely a very cool a cool event that I did, or not event, but a cool exploit um, that you can do. It doesn't just bar you with an invisible wall, from getting there. Um, so definitely a lot of fun. Highly recommend Legends Arceus if you haven't played it. Um, Now, two games that aren't on here, because again, I just used the pre-made one. Scarlet and Violet. I have played those games, and I have to say I'm very underwhelmed, very disappointed. Game Freak just again released an incomplete game, which frustrates me. Um, it's probably in the C tier. I don't know where in the C tier. Maybe ahead of Sun and Moon. Maybe just behind Red and Blue. Because again, it has like the same amount of glitches. So maybe it's B minus at best. Um, Make competitive playing a lot easier. There's a maybe it's my biases showing, but I do have a soft spot for some Pokemon. One of my all-time favorites, Tinkaton, is in the game. It's probably top 5 Pokemon for me. I love the legendaries, but I don't know how you go from some of these games which are maybe not Legends Arceus, but some of these games which have excellent performance. They're 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 just a lot of fun. And that Legends Arceus in that category is a lot of fun, and then you just plummet all the way back down to here. Like Scarlet and Violet aren't, and they aren't that good. They're incomplete, and terrestrialization, I'm not a fan of the mechanic. I don't like it. I didn't talk about much from Gen 8 because I didn't play all that much, but when I play competitive, I don't like Dynamaxing. Um, I don't like terrestrialization. I think it's a very game breaking mechanic. So again, Scarlet and Violet would probably be B minus at best, probably C tier, but so that's sort of where I'm at. But not to end on a sour note, but if you're looking to play Pokemon, highly recommend these games up here. Maybe even some of these, like if you're ever looking back to try to understand what makes the series so special, definitely start off Gen 1 and work your way up and sort of see how the game has progressed, see what they've done differently, and you can notice a lot of little things here and there. And you can also see you can also relive and see, oh, they changed this between generations. um in generation 1 they introduced, or they had the bicycle. Same thing in Gen 2, and then Gen 3 they introduced a different mechanic. There's 2 bicycles and they do different areas you can explore depending on which bicycle you had. um and then in Gen 4, in which they just put both of them in the same bike. And then when you return to Hoenn, you get both bikes at the end of the game, so you can explore anywhere you want. Um, so there's a lot of like cool little things like that, um, you can see the game's evolving. But also remember that some of the older games are kind of janky in their controls, or not their controls, but in their coding. A lot of the moves do different effects. Certain types, psychic, excuse me, are kind of might be broken in one generation, and then later on it's dragon and fighting, and then it's fairy, and you can sort of see the progression of the games. So if you're looking for a very fun series, if I don't know why you haven't heard it, I don't know why you haven't played Pokemon, but definitely play it. And this is just overall what I think. Again, I definitely have biases. I'm not gonna try to lie and say I don't, say that this is a completely objective tier list, but this is where I'm at. This is what I think. Let me know what you think. And thanks for watching.